This episode of the Better Every Shift podcast is sponsored by The Fire Store. Learn more about getting the gear you need at prices you can afford by visiting thefirestore.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Better Every Shift podcast. My name is Aaron Zamzow. You can call me Zam. I'm a fire officer. I've also been a writer for Fire Rescue One, along with numerous other periodicals through the years. But that doesn't make me smarter. What makes me smarter are the guests that we get to have and I get to talk to on this program. And today is no exception. Today, I have Dr. Nicole Sawyer that I met at Fire Rescue International just back in August and had the pleasure to listen to. And for you all listening, perk your ears up, bring your pencils out, and listen to what Dr. Sawyer has to tell you here, because she is a true gem for us in the fire service. She speaks you're kind of like Forrest Gump's mom. You really speak in a manner and a tone that we can all understand. First of all, Dr. Sawyer, thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on. Forrest Gump's mom. That's it for stupid right? Is as stupid does.
Yeah. I, honestly, like I when I'm looking at you and I remember listening to you, I'm like, gosh, yeah, that's me. And boy, oh boy, you're communicating these kind of high level concepts, and we'll get into some of them, but you really broke it down into a manner in which I can understand. And I mean, that's your background. You're a licensed clinical psychologist. You work a lot with public safety and first responders as a mental health consultant. You gave this really powerful keynote at Fire Rescue International. It talked a lot about survival instincts, how chronic stress plays into our general health, and then one of the things I really love and we'll touch on is just the generational expectations that really impact us on duty and off duty that we may not necessarily understand and recognize that are causing stress. And just the big picture thing, you drew some, I like you swore a little bit, which kind of really perked everybody up and got their attention. And I think you had mentioned that, one of the chiefs came up to you afterwards and said, hey, I really love the way that your tone and how you addressed it. You made us feel like, yeah, we're chiefs, and that's the room for this particular conference was chiefs. But you said you made us feel just like firefighters and human, and like we're just getting started. And I think that was one of the best compliments you could get. Would you agree?
Honestly, it really hit home. Like I really could not have felt more moved by that compliment that someone said, you made us feel like firefighters again. And that thought to me was like, oh my gosh, right? Like, because a huge aspect of becoming a chief and taking on that leadership role and the stress that comes with that is also the grief in the morning, the loss of being the firefighter, right? Like that's what you came to this job for, was to do that work. And of course, over the course of your career, there's, opportunities and they evolve and you can feel really proud about your accomplishments. But at the end of the day, there's still a loss of what really drew you to the profession when you're sitting behind that desk. And your guys are rolling out, right, to calls. And so that comment was just, it meant a lot. Yeah.
Well, and you also connect. I'm still a fire officer, so I'm still in the front line, and a lot of the stuff you said too, really, like it made me think a lot about how I am responding, not only as a leading my crew, but also outside and trying to handle myself in different situations where I'm talking to chiefs or talking to frontline firefighters, and so the things that we're going to talk about today, they affect anyone in the fire service. They affect first responders. I think it's also one that significant others need to hear because they can identify some of these things. And but before we get into that, what really got you into the first responders side of things?
Honestly, I fell into this very accidentally. I certainly didn't go into graduate school with any expectation of working with firefighters and police officers. And to be honest with you, didn't even know that particular population had any sort of personal meaning. I mention all the time in my programming that, my grandfather was a fire chief, but I'm going to be honest with you, like that I didn't understand that had value in my life until I started doing this work. There was no sort of underlying motivator. There was no sort of, part of myself that felt like drawn to that profession until I was sitting across from firefighters regularly and police officers and corrections officers. And it occurred to me that there was sort of a running concept, a shared sense of values, sort of a moral character, a work ethic that I could connect with.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point that I started recognizing, that this is where I come from. Not just my grandfather and his fire service role, but just, hardworking people, my parents, aunts and uncles that were invested in their communities and contributed what they had, even if they didn't have much to give, they gave what they could. And those sorts of values made me say, wow, these are my people.
Yeah. A kindred connection to service.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. And when you feel moved by that, right, when you feel connected to a population and you have the skill set. Right now, at this point, I'd come out of school. I'm a psychologist. I've got a background in trauma recovery. It just happened, right? It just became an opportunity that I grabbed a hold of, and here we are. Yeah.
And it clicked, and I think that really helps. The fact that you kind of think the same way too. That really helped with the communication side of stuff. I asked you if you working with the general population, and I love your response.
I don't know how to talk to those people.
Yeah. I don't know how to talk to normal people. I just know how to talk to first responders.
It's a lot. It's been lost to me at this point. I don't know.
Well, we're so happy to have you talk to us and speak to us. And today, I mean, there's so many different places that we can start, but I think the first place is to think about, in general, I'm a firefighter, and I like to say shit doesn't affect me. Mm-hmm. And I love how you just right away, like, where does your mind go? What's your response to that?
Well, I mean, my first response is like, okay, good for you right now. And I hope, right. My diplomatic response usually is like, I hope it stays that way. But right. But, if we're going to be honest, and honesty is the only way for you to stay as well as you feel right now. We have to acknowledge that there are inevitable physiological changes that are happening in your body. This is not something that you can prevent. These changes are inevitable because of the level of stress that your body and your mind is under for the duration of your career. And that level of stress is required for you to be good at your job. I mean, it's absolutely imperative, but it also wreaks havoc on us physically and emotionally. So those changes, we have to be prepared for. We have to acknowledge them. We have to be willing to say, yeah, they exist. What are we going to do to be proactive about managing them, right? We can't eliminate them, but we can manage them. And the only way you can manage them is if you own them, if you recognize them and say, yeah, this is real. I don't want to tell somebody what their experience is, right? If somebody's telling me I'm not affected by this, who am I to say that you are, right? I can't, it's not my job, but I want to say, okay, awesome. But let's be sort of open-minded to the fact that there could be stuff going on that could pop up at any given moment. And let's be prepared for that.
Well, and I think too, misery loves company. And what I mean by that is I say this too, and you and I speak a lot, similarly. I talk about building resilience just from my personal journey and, more of a application to what we do every single day. And you do that as well, but then you add the science behind it, which really nobody can question because it's science and physiology. And so you and I had hit it off already, but like, I think we surround ourselves by people that are kind of feeling the same way. I think we're all really functioning at like 80% optimum. And when you're all together, we all think, oh, we don't have any problems. Everyone else does. Right. Yeah. But you said physiologically, there's a lot going on, and you really touched on like stress and the cortisol response and how that affects us, not only physically, but mentally. And, so I think let's dig into that a little bit more, because there's so many cool points that you made that were pertinent. And I saw the audience kind of go, oh, yeah, that's me. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I think one of the things that's important to understand is that cortisol in particular, right, is an incredibly important part of our daily functioning, right? I mean, cortisol gets released in our body throughout the day in a rhythm that is designed to make sure that our body is getting its needs met, right? I mean, it's, there are small amounts that are released based on our body's needs and our body's rhythms. That's just baseline, right? We call it like a basal level, right? So, but then when you do a job that is chronically stressful, right? Again, this job that's not an option. It just is a hazard of the job. When you do a job that's chronically stressful, that means that your cortisol system is sort of always prepared to respond in a way that the average person's body isn't. And so then that little bit of extra cortisol that's always sort of prepared to respond is in addition to your normal cortisol cycle. Well, that starts to throw off that cycle. Now we've got a little bit too much hanging around for a little bit too long, and we start to see changes happening in our chemistry. That chemistry that depended on a nice, healthy cortisol rhythm is now in flux for 20, 25 years, right? That's going to take its toll on us physiologically. It's going to start affecting our digestion. It's going to start affecting our sleep. It's going to start affecting our aches and pains in our joints, our moods. All of the things that cortisol is in charge of start to get a little wonky when there's a little bit too much of it hanging around. And that's an unavoidable side effect, right? So our job is to then find ways to take care of ourselves physically and emotionally to help manage that unavoidable side effect of a chronic stress job like firefighting.
And I think the physiology behind it too, and an example that I was told by Dr. Kyle Ebersol, who works with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, he had done some studies where he actually went on the rigs and they measured, heart rate, body temperature, blood pressure, and compared it to 15-year captain and a 10-year firefighter. And right, like we think on the outside, it's just another car wreck at midnight. But I think what you're saying, physiologically, our blood pressure is up a little bit, our heart rate is up a little bit, our body temperature is up. Now, not so much like I think what Dr. Ebersol found was his was really up there because he never experienced those.
Right.
But ours still was at 10 and 15 years where I might be saying, just another car wreck, little fender bender. Yeah, someone broke their leg, someone, got a little head injury. But now I'm going back home and I'm back to the firehouse. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm fine. Right?
But that's what you're describing though is your frontal lobe, right? Your frontal lobe is the thing that's telling you, it's just a car wreck, right?
Yeah.
I've done 100 of these. We'll clear the call and hit the rack after. That's your frontal lobe talking. And our frontal lobe is the piece that makes us humans, right? That frontal lobe is the part that we have decision making and our judgment lives there, and the way that we filter information, the way that we filter what comes out of our mouths, right? Some of us better than others.
Filter what's coming out of our mouth.
Right.
What's supposed to filter? Yeah.
But that filter and that information is in your frontal lobe is being interpreted, right? It's being interpreted through your firefighter brain. What's not getting interpreted is that part in the amygdala in the root of our brain, that really sort of primitive part of our brain that's responsible for keeping us alive, that fight, flight, and freeze, the survival mechanisms that are built in so that we have survived as a species this long. That part the frontal lobe has nothing to do with that. So when you arrive at that car wreck, that initial response from your body is, this is a threatening situation. Then your brain tells you, oh yeah, but it's not my emergency, right? It's not my car wreck. That's not my kid in there. But you still had the chemical response occur. That had to occur first before anything got communicated to your frontal lobe. And so we keep having these physical responses to these emergencies, right? And they keep getting interpreted out, and that's okay. But that physical response still causes that blood pressure to go up, right? The body temperature to go up. All of those things are still the result of that repeated activation of that survival mechanism in our brains. We can't do anything about that. You can't think your way out of that. That's just the nature of the biz. And you're going to be exposed to exponentially more of those moments than the average human is. And so as a result, we're going to have to figure out how to tolerate this excess survival response that is the reality of your day-to-day life.
And do you think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing now this high rate of mental health issues, or have the issues always been there? Now we're just starting to recognize them?
Right. I mean, they've always been there, right? I mean, they've always been there. It's just our expectations of people now and who they are emotionally has changed.
Yeah.
The fact that we've been emotionally impacted by the job hasn't changed. Our brains really haven't evolved all that much, right? And I know that we can see that in others better than somebody. But
Yeah.
our brains have not evolved that much. But what has changed is what our expectations are in our families, in our communities. And so what's happening now is that those physiological responses and the emotional response of detachment and shutting down and closing off, those kinds of responses were acceptable, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago in people's families. If you were a good provider, you came home with your paycheck, right? You were a good man, right? You were doing your job. People would celebrate you for being stoic and detached and nothing bothered you and you could stuff it down. Like that made you more, that was strength. Now that kind of behavior of detaching and being separated and stuffing everything down isn't acceptable anymore. We're expected to be emotionally invested in our families. We're expected to be connected to our children, to be nurturing, to be loving. That requires a whole different set of emotional skills that weren't previously demanded of us. And it requires us to remain open and available emotionally up here in a way that we hadn't been expected before. So now when we're irritable, when we're grumpy, right? When we're snapping at people or when we're not sleeping or we're deciding we don't want to go to the kid's birthday party or we're not showing up for the anniversary dinner, those moments are causing real problems in our relationships. Whereas those kinds of demands weren't really there before. Mm-hmm. So that balance is off, right? We haven't figured out yet how to find that balance between being able to detach from the job when necessary, but also remaining open emotionally for the people in our lives. That's a tightrope we're still crossing.
Right. We haven't really seen that example, right? Not to say that what was going on generationally before was right. I think it was more, there was a lot of issues still there that were just covered up, right?
Sure, but culturally it was more acceptable. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, hey, that's just the way they are.
Right.
And now we're in this era, like you're saying, like, hey, I have to be more cognizant of it and I need to deal with it. In a way, that excites me a little bit, being this generation. Like we can lead the way in this and do this maybe in a manner that's a little more proper. But it also provides us with, man, I don't know if I'm doing this right or wrong. Like, do you have that conversation? And let's have that conversation, because I don't know. Dr. Rachel Zemlock has been on the program numerous times where I've had great conversations where I'm like, this is what I'm feeling, but am I right? Am I wrong? Do you have that when you work with first responders? Do you have that conversation a lot?
All the time. It comes up all the time because there isn't a model, right? So many first responders are legacy in their career, right? They had uncles, grandparents, father, brothers that are in the service, right? And those are the models for them. Right. So frequently what happens is they're saying, you know what, my dad and my granddad did this job and they seem fine. Right. They here I am and I'm falling apart. Right. And I'm having that conversation with folks all the time saying, yeah, but imagine yourself now. What are the expectations on you in your family that is different? Right. Did your dad have to grapple with this, and this? Right. I mean, well, no, not really. Right. My mom stayed home and she took care of us. Mm-hmm. And he went to work and that was his job. And that, right. Okay. Well, that's not your life, right? You have a spouse that has a full-time career. You have kids that you're, helping with homework and driving to soccer and doing bedtime with and baths and even discipline still, right. Is a factor. Those expectations require a certain side of yourself that you didn't necessarily have modeled to you growing up, right? Those previous generations weren't necessarily expected to deal with those. Those were delegated to someone else. And again, no judgment, right? That's not right or wrong. It's just a cultural shift that's occurred in our society. And that cultural shift is having an impact on the way that people expect themselves to deal with stress and trauma in the fire service. They can't look to their previous generation. They can't look back and say, well, I should just be like him, because that's not realistic.
Yeah. So that adds stress. That adds more 100%. To that cortisol, right? Like, so not only do we have the job, then we have to figure out how to respond about that job in a manner that's a little different and that we don't have an actual template for anymore. How do we see that, this cortisol response kind of, what are some of the things that we're finding that are the negative side of things? You had mentioned, what I thought was really interesting was the audience kind of went, when you said aches and pains and these, right? Like the audience kind of, I don't think we can correlate, or we do correlate, right? I mean, go down that avenue a little bit about symptoms, signs. What are things that you're seeing?
Yeah. The aches and pains one is, that one hits home for most people because it starts, right? Exactly. It starts way too young, right? I mean, the average person starts dealing with sort of that joint deterioration, into their 40s and early 50s, whereas a person who's in public safety, it starts feeling those changes in their bodies in their 30s. And, they'll start chalking it up to like, it's the gear. Oh, I'm sitting in my patrol car too long. All of those things. Oh, I'm getting out of shape. I don't make it to the gym enough. But there's another side of that. And that side is that excess cortisol in our bodies, because, so if we go back to like sort of a primitive expectation of humans, right? When we talk about survival, if you were chronically stressed as an early human, then you were probably under legitimate threat, right? Whether it was danger or you didn't have access to the resources you need. There's the sort of, proverbial saber-toothed tiger prowling around your village, right?
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, you're going to be in a prepared state to fight for your life, right? So when our bodies prepare for that, it floods all of our joints, right? All of our joints get flooded with a little bit of fluid so that we're more flexible, right? So we're capable of sort of, scrapping for our lives.
Right. Or running, right? Fight or flight.
Fleeing, right?
Yeah.
Or fleeing, right? I mean, we don't really have a lot of fleers in this world that we're talking about, but
Yeah. First responders and fleers don't really go together really well.
Tend to drive, right?
Yeah.
But so you're prepared to fight for your life, right? Now that part of our brain that caused that sort of flood to our joints when we needed to survive hasn't changed at all. It's as primitive comes for creatures out there, right? That fight, flight, or freeze response.
And what part again is that?
That's the amygdala, right? That's the amygdala, right deep down in your brain there, right? And so that amygdala fires off, and you get this response, right? That you're prepared to fight for your life, but that amygdala is firing off because the tone went off in your fire station, right? There isn't a saber-toothed tiger out there anymore, but just the tone went off and you had to prepare yourself to respond to a potential crisis. Well, when you're doing that over and over again for an entire career, and every time that tone goes off, you get a little push of extra fluid into your joints to prepare yourself to fight for your life, right? Well, that causes wear and tear on our joints. Our joints weren't designed to have that kind of inflammation for that extended period of time over and over again, right? Human body wasn't designed to tolerate that. And so we start to have these, eventually becomes arthritis, but we start to have these aches and pains. We get injured more often. It takes us longer to recover from those injuries, all because of this excess amount of cortisol floating around in our system. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, that's one of the ones that hits home for a lot of people is they go, oh, right. Because people don't want to talk about the emotional stuff. They don't want to say, but when you say like, well, your body aches and pains, they go, oh, yep. Wait a second. Yeah. I was, you see them stretching out in the audience.
Right. And I'm like, oh, yeah. But we just don't assimilate that. I mean, the other thing I think with men too, testosterone levels, right? It can affect testosterone. We've done a lot of research on a female reproductive system and how the job, can affect that. Like we found higher rates of birth defects, higher rates of or harder instances of getting pregnant. I think with males, we talk testosterone. We also talk obesity, that another side of heart disease, stroke. Oh, by the way, the main things that kill us can all be linked back to this cortisol.
Right. 100%. Right. Every time. And I'll joke with people too, when I talk about the different symptoms and you can see some of the doubters in the audience and I go, okay, all right, well, just take a minute for a second and visualize your medicine cabinet. Okay. All right. Well, all right. Now we're talking, right? Because again, those sorts of issues start to creep in very young. People start dealing with, blood pressure issues and cholesterol issues and all these meds that they're on much earlier than the average person would if they weren't doing this chronic stress job.
Yeah.
The Fire Store, equipping protectors with passion. Every decision we make as a company is about you, our customer. We wouldn't be where we are today without you, and we don't take that lightly. we understand that having the right gear can mean the difference between life and death. Our goal is to get you the gear you need when you need it at prices you can afford. Visit us at thefirestore.com for everything but the truck and shop our family of brands, including Streamlight, MSA, Lion, Fleer, and more. Now let's get back to the show.
And that's where the like obesity, it can affect your metabolism.
Right.
It can also affect, now we haven't gotten into the mood side of things, but like, can it affect me as a parent, as a friend? Am I more likely to like go off on someone like?
Oh, well, so that's my favorite topic, right? Anger and hostility and grumpiness.
We don't have an anger
irritability.
problem.
No, of course not. That's irritability, right? That's sort of that early sign that most family members notice, right? Is that, and early in the career, they'll chalk it up to like, oh, he's tired or she's tired, long shifts, whatever, stressful job, I get it. And it starts to become an expectation of who we are, right? So, and that's not necessarily who we really are inside, but we have this level of irritability that creeps in, and that irritability, that grumpiness is cortisol. Now, again, we have to go back to our primitive peoples, right? Because that's the part of the brain that's controlling all of this, right? Is that amygdala. Anger is survival, right? We don't survive, and we haven't survived difficult things. We haven't survived as a species for millennia because we have these existential appreciation for beauty and the sunrise and the landscapes, right? Like that's not why we're alive as a species. We're alive because when faced with life or death threat, we will claw, scratch, bite, and tear our way to survival, right? Either it be for ourselves or for our young. That's, and we see that in the news day to day, right? Like the mom lifting the car off the baby, right? Superhuman strength. That emotion, anger, rage, comes from that rush that is required for us to survive these life or death moments. So once again, when our brains are chronically responding to those little messages from our amygdala, every time that tones go off, every time the radio crackles, right, and our amygdala fires off a little bit of a notification, hey, get ready, we've got a potential crisis to deal with, we've got a potential trauma to be exposed to. Well, that means that our body is sort of always prepared just under the surface to rise to that threat level, right, to survive whatever is coming our way. So that means we're a little irritable all the time. It's just hovering under there. And it's important that it's there. But the problem is that doesn't work out so well in our families, right?
Yeah.
Where just a stupid little shit causes us to snap, right? Little things cause us to jump down people's throats. We get irritated by stuff. And as a result of feeling like an asshole all the time, we start to then detach and withdraw and say, I'm not going to get involved in this. And now,
so we really feel bad that we're responding that way because we don't want to. We can't control it in some cases.
That's right. We feel out of control.
Yeah, we forget how to control it, right? And this also for for the volunteer who has a pager going off, they're constantly listening, right? Like that's also there. It just hit me too, like, when right before the mic opens for tones, there's this tick.
Yeah.
And I hear that tick in my environment, like outside of the firehouse, right? There's just this certain tone or tick. And actually I can always feel my heart kind of up just a little bit, right? And that's that causes me a little bit, just a little bit.
Just a little bit, yeah.
But over time, that's affecting, like we were saying, joints, the way I handle certain situations, sleep.
Your food choices, even what you choose to eat after one of those moments, right? When we have that little tick that you hear, and then you get that little rush, right? And then suddenly you find you're craving a snack, right? All of that is connected to the demands that your body is putting on you, right? To be prepared to survive. Because again, that frontal lobe knows that little tick you heard in your environment was not you about to get toned out. It knows that, but it doesn't have any control over what's going on deep inside.
Right. The other side of the brain is saying, nah, I don't know that.
Happens. That's right. The flood happens.
And so I think that this comes into the next part of the conversation is look, all hope is not lost. There's things that we can do. And I love the message that, and I mentioned this before, when I say I'm fine, your response is what? Like during the presentation, you said,
that's bullshit. It's the biggest bullshit statement, right? I'm fine. It's just so, what does that even mean? Right. The challenge is that the statement is used as a way to deflect any further investigation into a situation, right? When we say,
it's really my way of deflecting and saying, like almost a passive aggressive, like I know I'm messed up, but I'm fine.
Right, leave me alone. Right, we're not going to talk about this.
Yeah.
And that, we're doing ourselves a disservice when we go down that road, but at the same time, we're doing a disservice to the people that love us, because they didn't ask us if we were okay for no reason. There was obviously some sign, some tone, some mood, and they're just trying to connect with us, right? They're just trying to be a part of our emotional lives, which again is a new phenomenon, right? This is a new phenomenon generationally. There was not that expectation before. It would have been completely left alone. But we're trying to be connected now. That is the emotional demand. And so when we say I'm fine, we're just slamming that door.
Okay. So what's the best way? I mean, I think accountability is, you said numerous times, and I personally, my journey is, I'm 51. I lost my ego, and you chuckled because I said as soon as I lost my ego, I really started to grow, because I understand how I'm starting to respond because of these different stresses, personally, and hopefully I'm allowing someone else to say the same thing. But I know I'm a work in progress. I know I'm messed up with that. But is that where it begins? Accountability, and then take me through what else I can do, or what else we can do as a first responder culture to really start making progress into being more of a connected, a well-rounded first responder.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a few different layers to that, right? From a personal standpoint, we have to be willing to own whatever impacts this job is having on us and our families, right? We have to be willing to take ownership of that, and recognize that the only responsible person for addressing those issues is us, right? We can't expect anyone else to decide what's wrong with us and fix it for us. It is up to us. And that starts with acknowledging, and that's where I think these kinds of programs are so important, is that starts with acknowledging, like, what are the various factors that might be happening? Not every single one of them is happening to every single person, but there is a physiological shift happening. Let's acknowledge it and take control of it. And I know that we all love control. That's why we get along so well, right? Because I'm a control freak too. So I get it, right? And so when we feel like we can control something, like, oh, so if I'm eating better and I'm, getting to the gym and all those things, I feel in control of myself, then I'm going to feel more in control of these physiological responses and emotional responses that are occurring. The other side of that too is also cultural, right? We have to be more willing to own our vulnerabilities in front of the newer people. There was a time that we were sort of expected to display this, like, that shit didn't bother me. Like, listen, kid, if that's going to bother you, it's going to be a long career. Right? Like we used to pull these sort of one-liners to squash any sort of emotional reaction we may have seen out of the new folks. In fact, there was a time, right, and maybe this was your experience, where the gnarlier the call, the more probies we wanted to get over to see it, right? Like, oh, we got a decapitation on Route 3. Let's go. Where are the kids? Get them over here, right? And it's like, and that concept of like, well, you might as well see it now and make sure you can handle it. And we recognize better now that you can't inoculate people to trauma. Like, you can't, expose them to a bunch of trauma and then they'll be fine for the future. That's not how it works. But what we can do is provide them models for being vulnerable. And I don't mean vulnerable like, oh my God, I'm a mess because of this, horrible call we just went to, but instead saying like, yeah, that one sucked. Like, let's just be real about that. Like that was, listen, I've been on the job 15 years and that's probably one of the worst things I've seen. So, let's be honest about that rather than just saying, oh, well, right. Let's hit the rack. We'll write our reports in the morning. It's it's an important part of us as leaders to be willing to acknowledge our own personal vulnerabilities, not telling them what's going to make them vulnerable, but owning our own, so that then they feel as safe enough to say, yeah, that one kind of got me. And they'll know that someone else might be like, yeah, you know what, those aren't the calls that get me so much, but I'll tell you what gets me is this kind over here. And now we're having a conversation about, how do you cope with that? What do you do with that? Right?
Yeah.
Because when we just shut it down and we tell somebody that they need to get used to it, then we're not preparing anybody to take better care of themselves. That we're doing to them what was done to us, right? Which was, suck it up.
Yeah. I'm fine.
I'm
Right?
fine.
We're just shutting that door right away, as opposed to saying, you know what, that's messed up stuff. And if that bothers you, that's good, because you're human.
That's right.
And it should bother you a little bit, right? Like, for me, that one doesn't affect me yet, but this one really does, or did, right? Like, open that door. So having conversation and making it more open to conversation is a great starting point with it. And we also mentioned understanding physiologically that there is stuff going on.
Right.
And we have to acknowledge that. And what are some of the other habits and things that if someone, actually, I'm not saying if, when our listeners listen to this, what I want them to then relay to other people about where and what we should be doing to help handle ourselves better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the most important place to start is in the mirror, right? If you've got to look in the mirror and decide whether you are at this point in your career who you thought you would be. Are you where you wanted to be? And what are the factors that are influencing that? And I'm not saying let's not find blame, right? Because that's such an easy game to play. But instead looking at it and saying, I'm not in the physical shape that I thought I would be in, right? I went to this job feeling like this is a really physical job, and I'm going to stay tight and fit for my entire career, and this is going to motivate me. And now here I am, I'm carrying an extra 15 pounds around the waist, and I feel like shit when I get up in the morning, right? All right, well, there's a place to start, right? That's a tangible place to start. We have to be willing to take a look at the parts of ourselves that maybe we feel like we haven't spent enough time working on. And some of that will be emotional. For a lot of us, it's a lot easier to start physical. And that physical stuff, when we feel success in addressing some of those physical things, helps lead to the emotional recovery as well. But that is the starting point. But then the next part is feeling as though you can be a good mentor for the next generation, right? It's a fulfillment piece, being a team player, connecting with the people that also do this. That's what brought you here.
Yeah.
Right. People didn't show up to be firefighters because they don't love people. Right. I mean, they'll tell you now that they hate people. Right. I get it.
Yeah.
Right. I get it.
I like certain people. That's what I would say.
Right.
Like
and that's
people,
okay.
Not everybody.
But being part of a team, being part of a group, being part of something bigger than yourself is the reason. It's at the core of why most people got into this line of work. If you've lost touch with that, that's a self-reflection piece. That's some work that needs to be done, right?
Yeah.
And a big part of that is often mentorship. Like, find somebody that you want to guide and give them what wasn't given to you. Like, be that person that you wish you had in your life throughout your career. When we start making those small adjustments, right, we got to think small. We got to think what's in front of us, what can we manage, what can we control. When you start small, that ripple effect is enormous, and you'll see entire cultures in a department change.
I think that's a great point too, because sometimes we feel like that satisfaction that we thought we would get from the job, some days you don't, because you feel like I'm just a babysitter. But if you're using every single day to make someone else around you a little bit better, which, by the way, is one of the things that our taglines here at Better Every Shift, which is why I knew that this is going to be such a great conversation, right? But if you're not getting it from the fulfillment of the job as much, look at the people coming in and use that as a means to connect back with the fire service, right? And I think that's kind of the whole point. There's maybe there are, and granted, like I know I've been doing this now for over 20 years. Not the podcast, but hopefully I will. Like we're talking 20 years from now. But I think you're right. Like there's some days there's no job fulfillment there. But if I can get a training in, or if I can make an impact with someone around me, that's that's just as good. And that's kind of what your message is there, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that, I think, again, it takes you back to your roots. It takes you back to why you were here in the first place. And we might feel a million miles away from what really brought us to the job. But if we start looking backwards and saying, okay, why do I love this job? Where can I focus more of my energy on that? Then we start a journey of recovery. And that one little step, that first step is all it takes.
And I'm going to say one thing, and we're going to bring it home. Burnout is a real thing, right? Like
It's a real
what we're
thing.
really talking about is how, if this stays unmanaged, if we don't try to take a little bit of control, is that where this burnout really hits? And what are some of those signs and symptoms? Or does it go back to everything we kind of talked about coming together?
Yeah. I mean, you know what? Burnout's a real thing, but burnout isn't the enemy. Right. Burnout is a natural experience of anybody that's doing a job that they feel remotely invested and passionate about, because you can't feel such a personal investment in a job where you have so little control and not occasionally feel burned out, like not occasionally hit that wall and go, what the hell am I doing this for? Right. Like that's impossible. So burnout in and of itself is not the enemy. Burnout usually means that we've got to do a little recalibration. Right. We've got to recalibrate our priorities a little bit. We've got to recalibrate our perspective a little bit. That's what burnout's usually trying to communicate with us. When we get stuck there, right? When we get stuck there, what we're usually bogged down by is all those other symptoms that we're dealing with, right? We're feeling burned out. We're feeling disconnected from our purpose in the job. And, right, we feel like shit when we wake up in the morning. We're drinking too much. We're arguing with our family so much. Physically, we're dealing with all these aches and pains. Our health is failing. You start adding all of that in there. Well, now we're going to get really buried, right? And that's a really difficult place to dig ourselves out of. So it's that combination that's really dangerous. But burnout in and of itself is a communication. It's our brain communicating with us and saying, hey, we got to make some changes here, right? Something's got to give. And that's usually a good motivator if we're willing to listen to it, right?
That's the other part, right? We got to be willing to listen to it. Hopefully, after listening to this, people will be a lot more open to and open the door to vulnerability. And I'll bring it home with the one thing. I mean, you made so many great points, and thanks again, Doctor. I knew this would go really, really well. I got tons of notes. We could talk for about 4 or 5 hours, which is why hopefully we will continue this on future episodes. But you hit on so many wonderful things. If someone's out there, they're feeling a little burnout, they're feeling like, okay, now this makes sense to me. What's your advice to them? Like you had mentioned, look in the mirror. You had mentioned, try to control the controllables, look at, physical conditioning, get some help with your mental awareness. Like what's the biggest bang for someone's buck? And what do you really want every first responder to take from your messages?
I think the most important thing that somebody can do for themselves is connect with what has meaning to them. When meaning is missing, that's when it all starts to fall apart. Because this is a shitty job. It's the best job, but it's also a shitty job, right? And it takes its toll on us physically. And the only way that you continue to feel valuable in this work is if there's meaning to what you do every day. And that meaning may not be, that call or series of calls that you went on that day that really just sucked the life out of you. That meaning might be being proud of what you represent in your community because it's important to represent those values to your kids, right? It might be something as simple as that, just being, right, a public servant. That matters to you, and you're trying to model that for the next generation. That meaning piece is where we get lost. That's where it all starts to unravel. That's where all the physical tolls and the emotional tolls start to creep in and really break us down, is because we've lost that meaning. Meaning is so powerful to ward off everything. Meaning is why we feel traumatized, right? Is because we interpret meaning in the experiences that we have. All meaning is what makes us human. That's what lives here, right?
In the frontal.
In
right?
that frontal, right?
Steve?
That's the part we make meaning out of things. And so when we have an opportunity to reconnect with the meaning that brought us to this job, the purpose that brought us to the job, that if you have to write it down and put it on a Post-it note on your mirror, right, to remind yourself every day of why you get up and do this, then start there, right? If that's all you got, if that's the only thing you could do for yourself today is remind yourself of why you get up every day and put on that uniform, then that's the best place to start. And the rest will fall into place, right? But you have to be willing to take ownership. You're the only one. You're the only one that can take responsibility for that, right? That's it. No one else can. And so if there's anything I want people to take away from this is that you are in control. 100%. You can't control what the call is. You can't control what's going on out in the street. You can't control what your chief's doing. You can't control what your partner's doing. But you can control what's going on inside of you here, right? And when we give up control, all is lost. When we take control back, we start to feel empowered again.
Yeah.
And that empowerment is what keeps us healthy and well.
Beautifully said. I think too, like, I really found gratitude the last like 2 or 3 years. And one of the things that really helps me find that is just being able to talk to wonderful people like yourself. So thank you for all your knowledge, for your passion, and for helping us. I think one of the things that we take for granted sometimes in the fire service is the people that maybe aren't in that front line, but after talking with you, you are there with us because you feel and exactly like what we're kind of going through from that physiological side of things, and when we all come together and listen to someone who maybe you may not ride the truck, but damn it, you understand it. So with that, I again just appreciate all of the different conversations and bits of information you gave for our listeners. And I really hope it resonates. I know it will for some. Is there a place we can reach you in case someone has more questions?
Yeah, I mean, really, like, I'm not a social media person at all, but I am on LinkedIn, right? You can just write in Nicole L. Sawyer on LinkedIn and you'll find me. A quick Google search of my name will bring up a bunch of stuff. So you can find me there.
And hopefully people will share this particular episode to somebody in their crew or someone that they know can use this bit of information. You can also email us bettereveryshift@firerescue1.com. And I'm going to keep in touch with Dr. Sawyer for my own personal benefit as well. So I really appreciate it. Like, this is like a therapy session for me. But I love every bit of your message and every little bit of information that you gave. We have to ownership. We have to be accountable, and we have to understand that physiologically there are things that are going on that we can't deny. But what we can do is gain control with some of these usable, tangible, small habits that you gave us. And I think all of this comes back together to really put forth the effort to learn something, to do something, and then to share something to make you and those around you better every shift. And with that, I thank you all for listening.